This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Agamar Chesima Tova. We're advancing our Friday Shiurim to Thursday, and I don't want the week to go by without your favorite part of the week. And since this is the last year, I want to formally do tshuva if I ever forgot to say by one of the Imponderables Shiurim that it was your favorite part of the week. Be'ezus Hashem, we'll try to be better in the future. But here are a few questions on the Parsha. Rashi says, why does Moshe Rabbeinu, and by the Shiurim are dedicated by Rabbi Glatstein Rose of Los Angeles, Nishmas, his brother, Tzvi ben Levi Yitzchak, his neshama should have an aliyah. Rashi says that Moshe Rabbeinu called to testimony heaven and earth. Moshe says, look, I'm flesh and blood. Today I'm here, tomorrow I won't be here. I'm going to summon as witnesses something that's eternal. So therefore I will summon heaven and earth. Question, is heaven and earth the only thing that's eternal? What about the water? Why did Moshe Rabbeinu say, I summon the ocean to be a witness? I mean, if anything, the water came before heaven and earth, didn't it? I mean, isn't Shamayim made out of Mayim? Okay, just wondering, why Dafka heaven and earth? It does sound more poetic to summon heaven and earth than to summon the ocean, but Rashi says on the pasuk, Haloihu avicha kanecha. Is he not your father? What does kanecha mean? Do you remember what Rashi says? Rashi says three interpretations. Rashi says, Perek Lamed Beis pasuk Vav. Rashi says, Shekinoacha, he acquired you. Shekinencha, he nested you. Shatikencha, he established you. Why is Rashi giving three interpretations of the word kanecha? This is a Chacham says one is a lashon of kaneh, of acquisition. One is a lashon of kinan, nesting. One is takana. Well, maybe it only means one. How does Rashi know it means all three? Okay, next. This is my favorite question of the week. Ask your father and he'll tell you. If I was writing Rashi, I would have interpreted your father. I would say, I remember how Rashi interpreted father in Parshas Va'eschanan. Vishinantam levanecha, teach your children. These are the Talmidim. And Rashi says, just like Talmidim are called children, a Rebbe is called a father. So why does Rashi say, Sha'al avicha are Nevi'im? Sha'al avicha are your Rabbeim, your teachers. Why does Rashi interpret it as prophets? That's not consistent with how he interpreted Vishinantam levanecha. Rashi says, and by the way, Rashi says, Elu hanavim, like the pasuk says, Avi Rechav Yisrael. In Va'eschanan, he uses that pasuk to tell me a Rebbe is called a father. That very pasuk. So what? It's a stira in Rashi. Why does Rashi in Va'eschanan interpret father as Rebbe and in Haazinu, prophet? Next, Rashi says, Al goiza love yirachef. Lamed Beis Yud Aleph. Kinesher yair kina al goiza love. He hovers over the young. Rashi says, Hashem, like a bird, does not overburden his people. He hovers over them, touching them but not touching them. When did Hashem do that? When Hashem came to give the Torah, He didn't reveal Himself from one direction, but rather from four directions. The pasuk says, Hashem misinai ba, v'zarach miseir lamai, haifia me par paran, v'yasa me rivavais kaidash. So one direction is Seir, one is Paran, one is Rivais Kaidesh, and the south side was Eloika Miteman Yavai. Question, why would it have been too overbearing for God to come from one direction? What's the difference to us whether God comes from one direction or four directions? Why is it more overbearing if it's one direction, and if it's four directions? I would have said if he comes from four directions, that's more overbearing. He's everywhere. And my other question is, why the first three directions the Chumash talks about? Seir, Para, and Rivas. The fourth direction is in the Nevi'im. Eloika miteiman yavai. Next question. Lamed Beis Gimel. Vayoichal tinu v'ysadeh. He will eat from the produce of the field. Rashi says these are the fruits of Eretz Yisrael that they ripen before any other fruit. I mean, is that a good thing that they ripen before any other fruit? What's the maila that they ripen before any other fruit? And fine. Lamed Beis Chaf Daled. Okay, you know what? This is really my favorite question of the week. Who is Rashi's Rebbe? Rav Moshe Hadarshan was one of the Rebbes, right? Miyasoider Shel Moshe Hadarshan. Rashi quotes him numerous times in the Chumash. All of a sudden we get to this week's Parsha, he has a new name. Umishmoish Rav Moshe Hadarshan Mitaluza. Very interesting. I never knew where he lived before. In Chukas, Rashi didn't tell me where he lived. All the other times, in Pinchas, he didn't tell me where he lived. All of a sudden, Haazinu, we're getting close to Sukkot, and people want to travel, they might want to visit Moshe Hadarshan. Rashi has to tell me what city. By the way, in case you were wondering, where in France Moshe Hadarshan lives, he lives in Toliza. Why all of a sudden does Rashi need to tell me where Moshe Hadarshan lives? Okay. And then finally, this is interesting, ha'ara, not a question. Rashi says on Lamed Beis Mem Beis, Meirosh Paroi Soyev, that Rashi says Hashem visits their sin and the sins of their forefathers, that when God punishes the Gentiles, He doesn't just punish them for their current evil, He goes back in time and He says, you're sinning now, I'm going to hold against you all the atrocities you did to the Jewish people from the earliest time. So it's a very interesting hanhaga, that the day will come that God will punish the nations of the world, not only for their sin, but for their ancestors' sins. Meaning, God's going to go back in time and punish the Goyim for what their ancestors did to the Jewish people. It's going to be on them as well. It's like it's a geder. It's the first time I ever saw this. Poiket avoin avois albanim for the nations of the world. This is the first time I ever saw such a hanhaga mentioned in the Chumash. Okay, Rabbi Sai, that's what I got for you on Haazinu. There's no shiur tomorrow. This is our last shiur before Yom Kippur. So I ask everyone for mechila. Firstly, if I ever kept you waiting, which I know I've done, I apologize sincerely for that. Sometimes things are just extremely trying to keep everything together. So I apologize if I took anybody's time or if I didn't treat anyone with the proper respect. I
ask Michaela for any interruptions that I made during the course of the year, which made your presentation more difficult.
Nah, I get more views, I get more hits, you know.
Okay, Rabbi.
Okay.
Wow.
Good Yom Tif, okay?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.